Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Minh and I'm your host from NDIS Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Today our special guest speaker is Keira Nicholson from Collective Design Agency from Perth, Western Australia.
Thanks for having me.
Hello.
And thanks for having me.
How have you been in your world in SDA in WA?
Good. It's been interesting. We've just done our first high physical triplex. Going through the building permits at the moment.
That's in Cannington, right?
Yes. Yep. That's correct. Done the design, battled the council, that was an interesting process, and then went through the disability providers for their specifications that they wanted to change, and then went through all the different consultants. So it's been really good.
Oh, wow. Well, before we go into that story and that journey, tell us more about you. Who are you and why are you in this space and how long have you been doing for, and tell us more about your journey in SDA.
So I've always loved designing. So I was the kid in the corner drawing floor plans and imagining where I'd put my mum and my dad and the rest of the family and stuff. And as I grew up, I sort of always wanted to do that through high school. When I was 17, my grandfather had a series of strokes. So my grandfather was more like my dad, so very close and was the person that I idolised. So I watched him go from his house that he built in the 1950s to a place from his pride to full restrictions. So wheelchairs, hoists moving between passageways and bedrooms, retrofitted laundry that changed into a bathroom, and saw not only the physical impact, but the emotional and the mental impacts that it has on someone, and also how people change how they interact with that same person when something happens to them. So even though we all have the same insides and spirit, externally people will change how they actually interact with you based on whether you are the same as them or different. So I started going through TAFE when I was just finished year 12 and studied building design, and I found I had a real keen interest in access. So when I first started out working for other people before I worked for myself, I ended up finding my avenue for access was commercial design, so that had a focus on meeting the Australian standards. So I had an affinity for commercial design, and then when the LHA certification came out to become an assessor, that was certainly an area I thought, yes, that means I can help additional people understand the hows and wheres and the whys. Yep.
Question.
Yep.
Can you explain to our listeners what is an SDA assessor?
Yep. So an SDA assessor needs to also be your first step, the livable housing assessor. So that is your standard housing to be step-free entry, bigger doors and entries off to the bathrooms and these toilets. When you're doing SDA assessment, they are the housing that needs to meet the requirements for full access within the home, bedrooms, laundries, bathrooms, kitchens, entry in and out the rear of the house that meets a person's requirements. So it's subject to their level. So high physical, which needs full assistance, hoists in the bedrooms and really nice big access ways into and through doors. passageways and living spaces for circulation area. Instead of just pushing someone into a corner and leaving them there, is giving them the ability to actually use the house and feel comfortable in their own oasis. Where your smaller level stuff, which is your ILs, your independent living, that's our standard housing, but it has bigger spaces in the bedrooms. So you're not having to put the full hoist in. You're not having to do adjustable bench tops. It can look very similar to a standard house, but it provides more flexibility for someone that has IL and can live by themselves without needing a carer there constantly to be with them.
So as an access consultant, as a consultant, are you seen more as an access consultant or a designer in the marketplace?
I've started bridging the two. I've got some designers that have asked for assistance to help understand the ergonomics of people, how they use the space and why some of the guidelines, why they're the way they are. But I have had a few designs and documentation that is the area that I'd be liking to move into. So we do have some designers who are looking to get into that space, that they have already their clients that they have relationships with that want them to go into the SDA, but they don't understand how or the why. Then I help them understand what is the differences between each of the levels. And if they are looking at designing a place that is really far out from shops that can't be in walking distance, what the impact is of that if you're looking at a high physical or someone that has fully accessible, how the reality of that works. Because unless someone's experienced it, not many people can put themselves in the position of, okay, well, this is how a wheelchair works. These are the limitations of getting into and out of a space, and you can't just pick up and move yourself. There has to be a flow and a circulation area that needs to account for that movement.
For the benefit of our listeners, Keira, can you explain to us, as a consultant, you can wear one hat or the other, but never two hats in this role as designer and or access consultant, please?
Yeah, so an access consultant and a designer are two different realms. If you are sitting as you're certifying your own works, that's a bridge of conflict of interest, because you could take a set interpretation out of codes that you deem are happy with, and it's not a third-party assessment. And you can have grounds of being called up, well, that was your interpretation, but reality X, Y, and Z assessors see it differently. So then it's like going, well, that works for me, but that's all that matters, and I'll pull that through. Similar to when you've had building surveyors and other fit-outs happen where they've had hand in additional projects or review over and things have been pushed through when they shouldn't have been. It's the same thing. It's setting up the establishment that it sets up the protocol from the start. So access consultants is a great move, that they have to be fully qualified now, which is the going through the Cert 4 and the diploma. I sit in the space of, as a designer, with an understanding of access, I help the designers move their design to the access space for then the SDA assessor to be able to have less explanation and trying to get them to grasp the compliance and flow of spaces, because if they haven't done any SDA or compliance to access before, there is a big growth space for someone to try and understand, well, a 820 door is not functional, it doesn't give that clearance. Or the 920 door only gives a set clearance, and even if you swing it, there are still restrictions. And why does someone need a certain handle where I like this handle? It's understanding how not all bodies work the same way as what that particular designer is in their head working. They've got to understand there's differences in how people move and address spaces.
I want to step back a little bit and pull back the lingo so our listeners can understand. We've got the words designer, we've got the words access consultant, we've got the words SDA assessor. Is there a mix overlap? Can you just break the three down again, please?
Yeah, sure. So building designer like myself is someone that does the designs of the visualization of your actual home or unit development that then takes it through council and through to your documentation of how it's built. Your access consultant is the one that's certified to assess over your Australian standards and NCC for both commercial and residential spaces across the board. So they look at not only within the boundaries of your site, but they look at streets and working into public spaces. So everything beyond your footprint of your home. An SDA assessor is the one that certifies your SDA build to the classification that you're going for. So say, for example, high physical. They work with you to the guidelines and the certification process to certify that it meets the high physical requirements to then take it to NDIS for the application process and your submission to get your approval that, yes, it's an SDA assessment. SDA assessor cannot design your builds and they cannot do the documentation of it because that's a conflict of interest. The SDA assessor is the one that assesses and puts all the paperwork together to provide for the building surveyor to compile for your CDC. The building surveyor cannot be the SDA assessor either. They have to be separated. And your access consultant doesn't do any of your design plans in regards to designing up or doing the documentation. They look over and actually make comments on how you can improve or if it does or does not comply. And then if there are restrictions to the site or on a commercial, say, unit development, they could be involved in the further scope beyond just the housing units themselves, the approach from street and parking variations and those elements.
Wonderful. So I'm gonna press replay and tell my clients to listen to that comment again. So, in your line of work, what do you enjoy most, and what don't you enjoy most? Least enjoyment.
I love doing the hand sketches. So I start a concept directly from a hand sketch for even if it's a single home or if it's a multiple site set out of unit developments. Because I'm putting myself onto the site and in a 3D element to then sketch out. And then I can actually hand it to my client so they feel it's in a raw enough format that they can input their ideas on without feeling constricted to a fully developed set of plans. I liken taking that from there into a 3D element and then helping them visualize that process and move on to the next and further stages. The elements that I don't really enjoy is when we're missing communication. So we're trying to communicate and the client's trying to communicate and we've just missed out each other, and then inherently you end up having some sort of conflict or disagreement, and you're trying to help the client visualize or communicate what they're needing. If you are just missing each other, the frustration is trying to figure out exactly what they're looking for. And sometimes it's taking all the way back to just Pinterest images to then get that, okay, yeah, that's where you're going. Okay, this is what I'm visualizing, then moving it forward. Sometimes with builders in that instance is explaining the differences between the builds and the why. Why can't I have a class 1 for this sort of development? Why does it have to be a class 3 and those sort of things? Or when you're doing commercials, the differences in classes as well.
Yes. Now, listen, I did a recent podcast with Angit Singh from Siddhartha Constructions about Class 1, Class 3 and fire sprinklers. And it's good that I want to ask you this question. What's your feedback on Class 1, Class 3 and fire sprinklers? Because there's a bit of gossip out there in the marketplace about this topic, and I want to talk about it in a minute, but have you seen a lot of Class 1 HBSs out there in the marketplace in Perth? Or have you seen, or are you actively doing fire sprinklers Class 3 on all your designs and workload?
So when we're looking at any of the concepts, as soon as we're looking at high physical, I classify it as a Class 3 because it is residential care. If there's a fire and someone's walking out, they're going to be looking after themselves. So someone that's in the bed, they cannot get up and move themselves out. They are subject to whoever comes in, the fireys, emergency services, gets them, takes them out. A hoist does not move super fast or any different to standard movement in case of emergency. It moves the same way as every single day. So if there is a fire at the front door or if there is a fire at the side entrance and someone is blocked in, if you were talking about a hotel or anything like that, you need to be taking into consideration that if someone is restricted in movement, you need to give them the opportunity to get out. Our fire sprinklers are a fire suppression tool. So that way, a fire has started and the participants cannot move out on their own accord safely and they need assistance, a fire sprinkler must be put in place because you're putting lives at risk if you are not putting that into play. If, for example, if you have an IL development, there could be argument that they could get themselves out. However, if you are dealing with someone who has auditory issues or has sensory issues and you have smoke, they need assistance to get out because they then get overwhelmed. This is an area that I've chatted to a few building surveyors about. In their liability and the builder's liability, what happens when when a fire starts, how is that person going to get out? You can't be there. The fireys will take time to get there and not you can't determine, the fire's going to start exactly in the kitchen at this point, and that means everyone else is going to be able to get out at the exact moment. You can't determine that because you can't say, I know which participants are going in here for the lifetime of the build. You can't lock that in. So you are needing to put those in to make sure the participants are safe.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I'm sure everyone agrees with what you just told us. However, as you know, barely any of the HBS houses in Australia that have been built or are being built even have a fire sprinkler.
Yeah. Like when the SDA course first came out, before they clarified that you had to have the access consulting course and the set requirements of architect or building surveyor and that sort of elements, I had sat for the course and reviewed all of the updates that continue to come through as part of passing that course. And there's still no stipulation in the updates. There is insinuation that it's going to change class, but there is no absolute it is, like when you look at the NCC. So yes, builders have grounds, or building surveyors have grounds to say, well, actually, based on the fact that it looks like a house and technically every day functions like a house, it could be classified as a 1B, which is a short accommodation.
Yes.
But based on when you look at the NCC and you're looking at when you have more than one participant that is not associated with each other and has restriction of access, that comes underneath a class 3, which is residential care. So that forces the sprinklers in hand. And I think this is where an area where chatting to a couple of building surveyors, it puts them in a position that they have to be the bad guys that put down the law and say, no, I'm not certifying unless it's this grounds. That means a builder or a client or a designer can move off to someone else who would go, oh, yeah, put that through as a Class 1B without actually it across the board that it is forced. And I think because it's still fairly new, there hasn't been the grounds to actually fix that into place as such.
Good. I want to tell you an interaction I had in Perth about 3 months ago. Had a meeting with a large agency who were doing a lot of HBSs in the marketplace. I won't mention their name. I don't want to embarrass them. I said to them, Class 1, Class 3, are you guys doing any or fire sprinklers on the Class 1 houses? And their response to me was, no, we don't need it. I said, why is that? Oh, we have sliding doors in every bedroom. I said, what? Your excuse for no fire sprinklers is you have a sliding door in every bedroom to get them out. That's your reasoning. He says, yeah. I said, oh my God, okay.
So
how shocking is that kind of response from someone?
Well, you got sliding doors, but if you've got a courtyard at the back of your property and you've got gardens either side, how is that person safely going to get out other than going back through the building that's already on fire? And I design medical fit outs, and when you look at that, the requirements of circulation and safety is you've got to have decent clearances around and your distances have to be accounted for. Same thing when you're dealing with these. You're dealing with people who are of the vulnerable community that are getting housing because they need that support. We don't have standard housing that is designed as such that you can move in. It's only people that are supported under the SDA that can get these. And these are the people that NDIS have deemed to the top level that actually require a house, not just a modification. So they need this housing to be accountable for them. And on the grounds that this is only just a money-making to give people the returns, it's the government is requesting investments from people to help the vulnerable provide an element that they couldn't do if they wouldn't be able to put out enough tenders to account for the housing that's required. So this is an avenue for them to be able to try and get what needs to be built into the community accountable. Unfortunately, you will have some sort of incident happen and then it will be classed as it must have this or it must have that. And it shouldn't have to come to that. It should be, well, I'm designing for those who are vulnerable and this needs to be accounted for. So if I do not know what requirements any of the participants will have for the next 20 or 30 years. So with these participants, we need to account for that.
Yes. Well, back to my gossip. I had a Zoom meeting with the largest SDA provider in Victoria.
Yep.
We connected on LinkedIn and then we had a chat on Zoom. And they told me that they recently went to a December or November CEOs of NDIS SDA conference recently with the NDIS. And the biggest topic was fire sprinklers. The NDIA is going to be enforcing a compulsory fire sprinkler mandate on all HBS, FA and robust housing.
Yeah.
Across all houses that are already built and all houses that to be built.
Yeah.
Which means the challenge here is getting people out of those houses for retrofitting processes.
Yeah.
Which is going to be a much more costly exercise to do that than doing it at the very start to begin with, which people were, I'm sure, warned of to consider to begin with anyway. But that's the problem. The problem is finding accommodation for them for 2 weeks before the retrofit to begin with.
Yeah, and considering there's not enough being built at this stage for those that are needing the housing to then get a short-term medium accommodation for the time being, you don't want to be going back and putting people into residential maid care facilities or aged care facilities just to hold them for that time period. because if they end up having a huge influx through particular builders, the timeframes builders have anyway for building due to trades and materials, you don't want to be then having people going back into housing for that period of time. And then where's that funding coming for that particular person having to go into that short-term action and all the on-flying costs of actually having to do the moving, the therapies, everything that has to move and then re-move into spaces. And you don't want someone who has sensory issues and issues with change having to be uprooted and then uprooted again, because that has massive impacts on them and they're not going to resettle. Then to retrofit something like this has to be done, you'd have to do it in waves instead of just benchmark across and everyone has to do it across the board. It's
the best case scenario is doing it at the very start during construction, and it costs you 40, 45, 50 grand cost.
Yeah.
You're doing a retrofit process, that's going to cost you more than that, 70, 80, 90 grand costs.
Oh, if that.
And then people don't realise this, and that is once you install the fire sprinkler system, there's additional maintenance costs every year, which costs 6, 7, 8 grand per year to run it as well.
Well, it's only if your hydrants meet the requirements with enough pressure. If you don't have enough pressure, or if you've done one in the rural areas where you may not have any scheme water, someone's not going to like having to put pumps and tanks in if there's no hydrant access there. How are they going to then address that?
Yeah. So again, it's just a gossip I'm mentioning here, but it's a serious topic that everyone is aware of, and in due course, it'll have to be enforced by the NDIA. It will have to be.
I explain to people when I've had designers come to me and starting to get into this space and asking questions, I explain. So with my grandfather, when he was restricted within the bed, the hoist, it would take him about 10, 15 minutes to get him into the hoist and then out of the room. And actually, I'm the one that moves around in the chair and shows the use of space. And so they can understand, well, okay, there is restrictions. And they explain, these have to be as class 3, there's no question. And I have a series of building surveyors that I refer off to and say, these people understand SDAs, these SDA assessors understand, and they work quite well. That way people can actually get the communication and the network that works, because SDAs, like a lot of Perth, is about your network. It's not just going one individually out and battling it by yourself. Everyone has different bits of information that can make the project work.
Exactly. So let's go back to Cannington. What's a triplex? I know what it is, but our listeners don't know.
Yeah.
What's a triplex? A duplex, triplex, quadplex. What's a triplex?
So you've got your single home. Then when you've got 2 buildings on the same lot, sharing a driveway, most likely common boundary wall, that's a duplex.
Mirror image, yep. Mm.
And then you've got a triplex, which is 3 buildings on a site, sharing common boundary walls and sharing common space. So our triplex is not the 3 of the same designs. We have 3 individual designs sharing boundary walls to account for different participants and their needs. So a singular living, 3-bedroom living, and a 2-bedroom.
When you say 3 sharing walls,
yep.
Is it 1 by 1 by 1, side by side like that, or is it different shape?
So we've got slightly different shapes, but the common walls are through the centre. So they are running straight down, and it's just the orientation to the rear of the lot is different than the orientation to the front of the lot, at the street, and then the centre one orientates to your actual common driveway. So it means you have access in and out from all of the actual units, and it allows for driveways to the front one instead of locking up your common driveway for additional services coming into any of your dwellings.
Yeah. So when I met you in Perth late last year with your client, the developer, that lady I met, you told me that you've been working on this project for a while now in getting everything prepared.
Yep.
Is construction begun or completed or lodgements? Where are you at with this
So
project?
we've finished all of our documentation, and all of the consultants that have done their reviews are finalising for us to then submit for our CDC and building permit. So your stamped plans and submit to council for building. So no building yet. We spent a fun amount of time with council going through and had to explain to them how the front unit needed to have an orientation to the street frontage. So under your R codes, preference for more than 2 dwellings is to have a common driveway. So all of them to orientate to the same driveway, which can, when you're talking to SDA, puts too many services on one driveway and too many people parking on the frontage. So we looked at widening a singular driveway so as it got to the actual property line, it looked more like 2 driveways. So it split the actual access onto the property rather than everyone just going down one singular driveway into reversing and then driving out of the same driveway. So too much traffic coming in and out.
Gotcha. I'm sure our listeners are very keen to understand more. What are the specs for this triplex? How many bedrooms, bathrooms in each of these 3?
So we've got, for our triplex, our first unit has 3 bedrooms with attached en suites and a powder room for the OA and a living space included, and courtyards to one of the designs, and the 2 designs are faced house. 2 of the bedrooms are faced street frontage, set back enough to have a bit of gardens and seclusion. Nice big rooms, so they're 4 by 4 with ample circulation space. And then we have the...
So that is a 3-bed, 2-bath...
No.
1 car, 1 powder?
3 bedroom, 3 bathroom.
Yep.
Plus a half for a powder room.
Powder, yep. 1 living and 1 car garage?
Yep, 1 car carport.
1 carport, okay. That's the first one?
Yep.
And then the size of that one, rough square meterage?
We're looking at 180 square metres.
Okay. The second dwelling, please. What's the specs there? Same or different?
Different. It's a OA and a bedroom, so it's 1 participant. There's a semi-ensuite laundry, so it means the OA can utilise the toilet if they need to go to the toilet and the participant's not in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Laundry is housed within, so circulation spaces. It gives a nice flow of storage. So if you are doing washing, you're not having to deal with a cabinet.
Yeah.
It's in that room. There is linen storage within the building, and then there is a nice open plan L-shaped kitchen integrated with living and dining space straight out to a courtyard, and trees in the back, landscaping in the back, and ample sort of storage on the site. Then we have the third unit at the rear, which has a carport a garage built into the actual unit. So it's not a separate structure. That has a reversing bay, so you can drive straight out the driveway, not having to reverse out. Then we have a courtyard that actually wraps around all the side of the entertaining area, so you can enter out 2 sides out of the living space, so directly next to the kitchen or from a living dining area. We then have 2 bedrooms, which are actually really quite large. So they are, I think it was about 6 metres by 3.8 metres. So they have a retreat and bedroom space. Both of those have en suites attached as well. And there's a powder room combination with laundry for OA and visitors to use.
How many square metres is this third one?
Ended up being roughly about 190 square metres.
Okay. And the second small one, how big was that one?
That one was 100
small?
square metres.
Okay, wow. This is all HBS?
Yes.
So we have 3 OOAs on site.
Yes.
3 bed, 3 bath, 1 bed, 1 bath, 2 bed, 2 bath. So participants are 1, 2, 4 participants. Because triplex. Okay. Wonderful. Wow. Can't wait to see this come out of the ground, hey?
Yeah, we're in the process of putting a twin motion video together of this model because we use ArchiCAD. And then we've done all the colour selections and all the items. So we're looking forward to putting that out and putting it up so people can actually have a look, and it's good for visuals as well.
Wow. This is very unique, this project. You must be so proud of this.
I like doing these. I've done a lot of medicals, which are very tight spaces, and you have to use design solutions to get things to flow and comply. Similar with getting all of that flowing together to work.
When do you think completion of this project will occur?
Based on the timeframes we were chatting so far, we're looking at roughly about 15 months as a ballpark. That's subject to once we actually get this all laid out and CDC and building permits sorted, then we're looking with our client and the builder they have laying the timeframes out clearly.
2 years?
Generally,
2.5 years?
I find it's close to. Even with our residential houses, it's taken a fair while, but that's the ballpark they had so far. Once we sort of get all our permit out and all the quotes and everything is sorted, then it starts laying out its clear timeframes.
So the floor plans are 180 square metres plus 100 square metres plus 190 square metres. How big is a block of land, by the way? Land size?
It's about 970.
Wow, awesome.
Yep.
That's plenty great.
Yeah.
This is a buy and hold by the developer, isn't it? Not going to sell it.
Yes. So they are working with a disability provider to make sure that the plans go to them. They reviewed over, and so they already have an indication of the participants they'd like to go in there, but it's designed generally to take into account that if they transition and someone else comes in, it's designed flexible enough that it allows them to utilise that space. So bathrooms are designed that if we have shower trolleys, they can go in. If they are looking a bit more independent, then the bathrooms are designed to retrofit actual hoists from the bedroom into the bathroom. So it allows that flexibility.
Yeah, great. Wow. Any words of advice you have to developers or investors who are looking at doing unique, bespoke design projects like this? I mean, I'm sure you've had some learned experiences from this big exercise. Any advice that you would have for anyone listening on this kind of approach?
With SDAs, when you're designing it, inherently you do tend to look at it like a residential. Start looking at it as a commercial build. The flow of the sizing is residential, so you are dealing with people's lives. However, the substructure of it is actually commercial. So if you're not experiencing commercial build, engage people like a design consultant or an access consultant or a building surveyor up front to help guide you in that process, because with the SDA guidelines, there is so much more involved, especially like the high physical. You're not just looking at that, you're looking at your Australian standards as well. So getting a bit of assistance as you move forward makes it easier than modifying plans once you've got all the information on it and you've progressed to a point of documentation, then have to make massive changes. So getting the people involved. people who are wanting to do it as an investment, thinking, oh, great, this is a next new thing, and they just want money in, money out. It's talking to people first and finding the grounds. If you're looking at a return to get people in, the current housing market, but doing instead of an SDA is LHA, which still accounts for heaps of people under the NDIS. Kids that need the requirements and need assistance, they don't get the SDA housing because the parents are not the ones that are actually needing the SDA. So housing that they can go rent, because there is a severe lack of that sort of housing around. Developers could account for a good 60% of the population that either are aged care or have some family member that has requirements. They can still make their returns in that element. When people move into this SDA space is to remember that it's dealing with people's lives and people's safety. If you're thinking as purely this is the next thing to make money, take stock and actually go and find out who are the people you're impacting, and actually see who you're working with. Go talk to disability providers. See if this is an area that you want to really be involved in, because it takes a lot of care and focus. You can't just put a matchstick box together and expect someone's going to live in it, because you're going to end up empty. And you're going to get no funding, and you're just going to have this empty space that then has to be let out to general public, which is not as desirable as someone down the road that builds a 1A home.
Exactly. Keira, thank you so much for your time. We've hitting 41 minutes now. This is a lot of content and advice you've given to us.
Yeah.
I'm sure people have to listen to it 4 times over to get all the jargon in their heads. So, are there any other projects you have coming up on top of this?
Yes, we have another SDA that we're in concept stage for, but we also do commercials and residential. So we've got a few of those in-house at the moment that we're working on too.
Good.
Yep.
So, Keira, how do people get in contact with you if they want to engage your services further?
So on our website, there's a contact page that you can put details down, and you can put all of your information.
And the website is?
collectivedesignagency.com.au.
And is there a 1-300 number or a phone number?
No, it's actually my number, because we're only a small team. So It's direct to me, which is the phone number and emails directly on there. They can certainly go through. So they can email or they can phone call through.
Wonderful. We are very bullish on the future of SDA in Perth ourselves. We see a lot happening in the development side and also the single dwelling side as well. We'll be sending staff over there in the coming year or 2 years to work and review on all our projects over there as well. And we look forward to catching up with you in person over in Perth sometime soon, Keira.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.